Folks, it's clear that we have a serious problem in Africa. And let us come even closer to home. We have serious problems in East Africa. In Kenya, we have BBI politics, something which started out well. Indeed, the handshake brought back peace to Kenya, although many people don't want to hear that, but it's a fact. But now, where BBI politics has reached, moto kama pasi. And we had two politicians who recently complained that the state is spying on them. Yeah, their drones hovering over their private residences. Electronic gadgets in their houses have been tampered with. Of course, I'm referring to Makueni Governor Kivutha Kibwana and Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. And clearly, what warranted such state attention were their views concerning the BBI. In Tanzania, we have just seen an election, if you can call it that, like no other that country has ever witnessed, where the ruling Chama cha Mapinduzi, CCM, garnered 85% of the vote. And this was also reflected in the members of parliament elected. For all intents and purposes, the Tanzanian parliament now has no opposition members. There are very few. In fact, the opposition has told us that they have advised their members, those few elected, not to be sworn in, not to go anywhere near parliament or their elective offices. But that is not all. Opposition presidential candidate Tundu Lissu fled the country back to Belgium. In fact, before leaving the country, he was holed up in the German embassy in Dar es Salaam for over a week. And he left the country under the diplomatic protection of the Germans. You know, this Tundu Lissu story reminds me of a very similar occurrence that happened in Kenya in July 1990, when a dissident lawyer called Gibson Kamau Kuria fled the country. What happened is that the local boys, intelligence boys, were after him, and he fled and ran to the US Embassy in Nairobi, where the then US Ambassador to Kenya, Smith Hempstone, took him in. You know, no country is allowed into the embassy of another country or high commission. That is foreign soil, legally. And then what happened next is that the US ambassador escorted Bwana Gibson Kamau Kuria onto an aircraft at the airport and stayed with him until the aircraft took off. And it is said that throughout the journey from the US Embassy to the airport, the police were closely following, looking for an opportunity to grab Bwana Kuria, which they never got. And under the protection of the American ambassador, and without a passport, Bwana Kuria flew out of the country into exile. That was in 1990. Tundu Lissu's case is very similar. Although I understand those communication between the German envoy to Tanzania and the Tanzanian government. And as a result of that communication, Bwana Lissu was able to renew his passport and then was able to fly out. But there are so many similarities. As they say, there's nothing new under the sun. And then there's the case of Bwana God bless Lema, who fled into Kenya very dramatically. But the real drama is what is unfolding right now in Uganda, where so far, at least at the time I was making this recording, it is reported that over 37 people have lost their lives in clashes with the police. Main opposition candidate, Bobi Wine, was arrested and charged and then released a few hours ago. But what he was charged with is very interesting. He was charged with spreading the Wuhan virus, contravening COVID-19 protocols. And yet the rallies of the incumbent President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni have been going on without hindrance. So far, it is safe to assume that what we saw happening in Tanzania will repeat in Uganda. The incumbent will win. It doesn't matter that so many people across the country are protesting against his rule. But somehow, magically, he will get a landslide victory, like in Tanzania. So, we have a problem in East Africa. And it seems to be the same problem in all the East African countries. Of course, to a lesser degree in some, and to a greater degree in others. But precisely the same problem. So, what is this problem exactly? In my view, it is the problem of the intelligence community running the country. That's really what it is. Let me explain. The intelligence service of any country is supposed to focus on external threats. And of course, internal threats, which are considered serious enough to be a threat to national security. But unfortunately, in Africa, the main work of the intelligence boys is local politics. And I'll tell you where a major problem emerges. A sitting president uses the resources, manpower, the entire intelligence service to spy on the opposition, if there's an opposition in that country. I'm talking about a situation where there's no election. And they use that information, unfairly of course, to stay ahead of the opposition all the time. Now, of course, this is very unfair, because in a country that claims to practice multi-party democracy, it's supposed to be a level playing field. And one is supposed to win based on their superior policies and their ability to persuade nationals to side with them, so that when an election comes, they win that election fair and square. Now, things go terribly wrong, because in those intelligence services, especially in Tanzania and to some extent in Uganda, when those intelligence services are run by some very old people with old thinking, and some of these people, individuals, are hardly literate, and therefore their thinking capacity is limited. And what happens is that they end up using brutal means, like what we're seeing in Uganda and what we saw in Tanzania, to silence and crush the opposition. Let me give you a few examples. If you want to steal an election, the most important thing is to make the results believable. Former President Moi of Kenya was a guru at that. He very rarely interfered with parliamentary seats. So that, for instance, when at the end of the elections, the opposition had too much power, he would embark on triggering defections, from opposition members of parliament. And of course, a by-election is much easier to win, even fair and square, because there are fewer voters involved. And then in the presidential election, what would happen is that only a few minimum votes would be stolen. He would end up winning, of course, but not by a landslide. Now, what happened recently in Tanzania is in fact a mathematical impossibility. 85%? Go and tell that to the birds. To quote former President Mwai Kibaki, he said, even rigging requires intelligence. And we have another very serious problem in Tanzania. A lot of the things happening in Tanzania happened during the rule of President Moi in Kenya. However, there's one huge difference. When those things happened in Kenya, Kenya was not a multi-party democracy. We had one-party rule. And I'm suspecting that the old men in the intelligence service in Tanzania are saying, after all this was done in Kenya during the Moi days, therefore we can do it. Oh, Tanzania is a multi-party state. There's some certain things you don't do. If they wanted to copy Moi, they would have looked at what Moi used to do when Kenya became a multi-party democracy. And then they copy-paste. But then you see, old men ambao wamepitwa na wakati are just that, old men. You can't bend them. You can't force them to change with the times. They're beyond that. And I believe that is the major problem in Tanzania. Because that country has some very serious problems ahead. Tundu Lissu's lawyer, Robert Amsterdam, has completed his submissions to the International Criminal Courts at The Hague. And I believe filing should happen early next week. Now, I still hold the view that President John Pombe Magufuli has done a lot for Tanzania. However, his regime has created problems that he does not need. Problems that would have been avoided, like this 85% business. In other words, what the Tanzanian president's regime is doing is that they're forcing a situation whereby foreign interference in that country is going to be inevitable. Something that would have been avoided. What is so difficult about sitting down with the opposition and negotiating for the good of the country? What is so difficult with that? After all, politics is a game of persuasion. It's not a brute force game. It has never been. You know, wisdom should tell you that you can never continue to rig elections forever. They'll reach a point where it will be completely unviable to rig a presidential election. And then, what will you do? In Uganda, for instance, even if the inevitable happens, we can already see it's not going to be business as usual, because already people have lost their lives. We're told over 37. And voting is not due until January, I believe the 17th. And today is only the 21st of November. So what is going to happen between now and then, and January, when Ugandans go to the polls? Of course, we know the intelligence boys have no other ideas. Those old men have no other ideas. It is just to crush the opposition. It is just to use brute force. And it doesn't seem to cross their mind that the more you use brute force, the more you crush the opposition, the more popular you make them politically. It is human nature. You know, the best way to illustrate this problem, and enable all of us to understand it, is to go back to the days of Tanzania's first president, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, who of course also used the intelligence services. But the difference is this: he is the one who processed information given to him by the intelligence service and decided what action to take. But it seems nowadays in Africa, the intelligence boys process the information themselves and they recommend the action to be taken themselves. We don't have strong leaders who can process this information and decide, let us do this, let us do that, make a wise decision, like President Moi in his time. And admittedly, President Yoweri Museveni in his younger days. But now I think in his old age, he has lost it. Because what is going on in Uganda at the moment is completely unacceptable. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha.